Thank you very much for having me today. I guess I have to dispense with the pleasantries and dive right into the presentation. So, can we have the next slide, please? Basically, I'll provide a short background as to why or how we are conducting a long-term recovery post-disaster in the Philippines. In the past, economic development is often based on a very simple premise. It was believed that economic development would follow a predictable manner based on fixed quantitative relationships between input and output. The more resources a community or a country has, the greater is its potential of development. However, as we have repeatedly experienced, disaster disrupts this normal path of economic development. The challenge, therefore, would then be is to reach resilient recovery and avoid the pitfalls of failed recovery. So from this simple premise, my presentation will highlight disaster risk reduction as an integral part of development from the lens of post-disaster rehabilitation and recovery. Next slide, please. So allow me to share with you this piece from Mary B. Anderson of the International Relief Development Study. Anderson highlighted the impact of failed relief, rehabilitation, reconstruction, and development programs, and how this failure perpetuates the cycle of marginalization. This support, in broad terms, the transition from a hazards paradigm and response-oriented consequence management to a more proactive, vulnerabilities paradigm driven disaster risk reduction and management institutionalized through the promulgation of the Republic Act 10121 or the Philippine Disaster Risk Reduction and Management Act of 2010. Next slide, please. Section 9Q of RA 10121 established the Rehabilitation and Recovery Management Service to deliver the Office of Civil Defense's mandate of providing leadership in the continuous development of strategic and systematic approaches as well as measures to reduce the vulnerabilities and risks to hazards and manage the consequences of disaster. Similarly, Section 9, E, F, K, and P guided the RRMS in facilitating the preparation of rehabilitation and recovery programs of disaster-affected communities. The Rehabilitation and Recovery Management Service was officially established in 2017, and since then, we have been on the front lines in post-disaster rehabilitation and recovery. Next slide, please. As such, over the period of 2 years after the events of the Marawi siege, the Disaster Rehabilitation and Recovery Planning Guide was institutionalized through the leadership of the National Economic and Development Authority, acting as the Vice Chair for Rehabilitation and Recovery. And by Rehabilitation and Recovery and the Recovery Management Service of the Office of Civil Defense as the executive arm of the National Disaster Risk Reduction and Management Council. This document guided recovery decision makers, planners, and implementers who face an immense task in assessing, strategizing, and delivering services to affected communities in preparing pre-disaster and post-disaster recovery plans and programs at the national, regional, and local disaster risk reduction and management councils. As pre-disaster recovery activities include the preparation of science-based scenarios, risk assessments, baseline information, recovery strategies, and sources of financing for recovery. This planning guide facilitates early and thorough planning, not only to address the hazards, but also the root causes and the dynamic pressures that lead to fragile livelihoods and unsafe locations, resulting to a higher or greater disaster risks. The Rehabilitation and Recovery Planning Guide and its offshoot, the Ready to Rebuild training program, aim to build local recovery leadership on project management for long-term recovery and policy formulation. By preparing more efficiently for possible rehabilitation and recovery needs, post-disaster recovery planning will only need to be readjusted according to the post-disaster risk assessment's results. Such adjustments may include scaling up of national social services, activating planned strategies for livelihood and infrastructure, setting up institutional arrangements, and financing of activities, and integrating sustainability in the recovery process and the community's visions for development. The framework and recommended mechanisms outlined in this guidebook were enriched by lessons learned from previous major disasters necessitating long-term recovery, particularly from Typhoon Yolanda with the international name of Haiyan and the Marawi Siege. This guide is divided into 5 parts. However, since the guide is available for download from the NDRRMC website, I will focus on the most important part of the purpose of this gathering, to highlight the Philippines' effort in long-term recovery planning. Next slide, please. The most significant development in rehabilitation and recovery planning is the alignment of the recovery framework with a longer-term reference. So in the Philippines, it is the Ambisyon Natin 2040. To translate, ambition is ambition, a strong desire to do or to achieve. Or loosely, it is also used as a call of the government's shared national long-term vision. The Philippines Development Plan 2017 to 2022 under the administration of then-President Duterte is the first development plan that follows a national long-term vision, Ambisyon Natin 2040. It represents the collective vision and aspirations of Filipinos for themselves and for the country. The 2017 to 2022 Development Plan also took off from the administration's 10-point socioeconomic agenda, as well as our international commitments to the realization of the SDGs, or the Sendai Development Goals. The Sendai Framework for DRR, the Paris Agreement on Climate Change, and this plan aimed to lay a stronger foundation for inclusive growth, a high-trust society, and a globally competitive economy towards realizing the vision by 2040. The strategies to achieve the goal are grouped under the following 3 pillars: malasakit, or enhancing the social fabric; pagbabago, reducing inequality; and patuloy na pag-unlad, or increasing growth potential. Under pagbabago, vulnerability of individuals will be reduced. Policies and programs will be put in place to ensure that their social, cultural, and economic rights are protected, and that they are eventually empowered to participate in the development of the country. There will also be programs to help ensure the well-being of individuals and families against economic risks, natural and human-induced hazards. The development plan also highlights the need to build more resilient communities. The housing program of the Duterte administration is in line with the new urban agenda of developing integrated neighborhoods and sustainable communities. Innovative solutions to housing construction will be encouraged, and alternative modes of financing will be developed to improve the access of families to decent housing. Community relations will be strengthened, and community organizations will be empowered to engage with government in ensuring the safety, security, and development of their communities. 2040 is still a long way to go, but the foundations have already been in place. Next slide, please. The general framework for the rehabilitation and recovery, as provided in the figure, seeks to align the sectoral or thematic outcomes with medium-term outcomes for DRR and the country's long-term goals of having safer, adaptive, and disaster-resilient Filipino communities. The framework may also provide a basis for designing a monitoring framework for the rehabilitation and recovery program, particularly on how program and project outputs contribute towards the attainment of the global goal of building back better and fully restoring economic and social conditions in disaster-affected areas. The components of the general framework as can be seen, is a long-term goal, the outcomes, the general strategies, cross-cutting issues and concerns. And I think I might just end here before I exceed the 10-minute that I was given. So thank you very much, and I'll be looking forward to your questions and insights. Thank you.